Hi Year 9, Mr. Tepler here to walk you through our next lesson of Year 9 Humanities in Week 8 of Term 2. This lesson, we're looking at two key terms, two key words that are related to economics. We're looking at developing our understanding of imports and exports. And our success criteria is to define these key terms, so what are they and how are they different, and then also to understand how are imports and exports related to the global economy. How are they related and connected to globalization, what we looked at in our past lesson. So, speaking of globalization, as a result of globalization, goods and services that are produced in one nation can be sold all the way around the world. So because of the transport and the communication advances in technology, we can sell things far away from where they are made. This benefits everyone within the global economy. So producers, the people who are making these goods and services, have an increased market to sell their products, so they've got more customers. Instead of just selling things to 100 people in Melbourne, they can sell things to 1 million people around the world, which is going to be more money for them, more profits. And then consumers, they also benefit from globalization because they have access to new products or rare products from elsewhere in the world. You know, if they don't have something in Australia, it doesn't mean they can't get it, they just get it from somewhere else. So, those goods and services that are traveling in and out of countries are either two things. They are either an import or an export. So a nation can import goods and services into their nation, so they're bringing it in. So import means you're bringing something into your country, into your home. Or nations can export. They can export it, they exit the country. So they can export goods and services elsewhere. So all those things that are flying around in planes and ships around the world because of goods and because of globalization are either imports coming into your country or exports going out. So an example of an import. Let's say Mr. Tapley buys a jacket at Chadstone in Melbourne, Australia. However, the jacket was made in Vietnam. So the jacket has been made elsewhere and it's been imported, it's been brought into this country. So that's an import. An example of an export. If Mr. Tapley, Old Farmer Tapley, sells his chickens in Melbourne, Australia, to producers and businesses in Indonesia, that means I'm exporting something. Those chickens are an export to a different country, to Indonesia. So that's the difference between an import and an export. Important you understand that difference because we'll be talking about those two terms throughout this lesson. So, because of globalization, we've gotten a lot of international trade. So because I can sell things to other countries, it means I'm not just selling to Australia, I'm selling internationally. And trade between nations is facilitated by free trade agreements, or FTAs. So you can't just do whatever you want when you're selling things to customers, whether it's face-to-face or whether it's across the world. We have rules, we have practices that are outlined in these FTAs. It's kind of like a code of conduct for big international companies and countries. So these FTAs outline the rules and practices for the movement of people, goods, and services. So a free trade agreement, as the name suggests, is about free trade. It means that I can sell whatever I want to whoever I want around the world. So a free trade agreement does not restrict international imports and exports, and it actually encourages a global exchange between nations. So people who want to partake in globalizations, different countries that want to trade with each other, they'll say, hey, I like you, I like what you're selling, let's sign an FTA, let's sign a free trade agreement. They'll do that, and that means in the future, they can sell each other whatever they want, they can buy whatever they want, and it's a big part of globalization. So, FTAs can help increase national economic growth. So FTAs, if I'm selling more things, if I'm buying more things, my economy is going to improve. It allows workers to migrate to other nations for job opportunities. So part of an FTA is not just the movement of goods, but people. It means that if Australia and New Zealand sign an FTA, it means I can go work in New Zealand and get paid to work in New Zealand at a different job. And it provides new markets for businesses to access. So it means that businesses don't just sell things in one country, they can sell things around the world. So basically you've got globalization, which is everyone being connected, selling, moving around the world. You've got imports and exports, which are the things that they are selling or buying. And then FTA, that's basically the rules, the practices, it's the guidelines, the guidebook. Thou shalt do this, thou shalt not do this, for globalization. But while a free trade agreement between nations allows for free and very accessible, very easy breezy trade between nations, some people are very much against global trade. Some people are for it, but some people don't like globalization. They don't like the idea of buying something that wasn't made in their home country. So, to encourage or discourage people, to encourage and discourage imports and exports, nations can do two things. They can place either a tariff or a subsidy on goods and services. And they do that to encourage or discourage people to only buy Australian products or to buy products from elsewhere around the world. So a tariff is an additional tax placed on international imported goods. This causes international products to be more expensive than local products. So, for example, if the Prime Minister is looking at Australian farmers and he's seeing that all the Australian crops are really not being bought by people in Australia because everyone's buying cheaper stuff from Brazil. I just picked a random country. The Australian Prime Minister will say, our farmers are really struggling. These guys are struggling. How can I help them out? I know what I'll do. I will put a tariff or an additional tax on these crops coming in from Brazil. And that means that they are now more expensive than the Australian ones, so more people, more customers are going to buy Australian foods. So if he sees that the Australian farmers are struggling, he might put a tariff on international goods. The other thing you can do is a subsidy. So subsidies are a payment made to local businesses to help increase productivity and profits. This allows local businesses to sell their goods and services for cheaper than foreign companies. So if the Prime Minister of Australia, again, sees that the Australian farmers are struggling, he says, okay, well, I'm actually going to give an extra payment, some additional money, a little reward to these local businesses that will help them sell their stuff for cheaper than the international stuff. So these are two things you can do either to discourage international trade, to punish those big international companies, or two things you can do to help your local businesses, your homegrown businesses. So you can either place a tariff or a tax on something, so that's kind of the negative symbol there, or you can do a subsidy. So a subsidy is a positive. So, I'm losing my voice in these videos. I would have thought that I'd actually be better at talking, but no, apparently not. Anyway, what we are doing today are lesson activities. Read through chapter 22.6. I'll show you where that is in a moment, and complete the following questions in your digital workbook. The questions aren't the textbook questions. These are questions that I have come up with, so you don't have to go looking for chapter 22.6 questions. It's just reading that chapter will give you extra information about these topics and to answer those topics, so I encourage it. I'll show you where that is now before I forget. So that's where we left off in our last lesson, 22.7. Too far. There it is. 22.6, imports in the Australian economy. So you can see it talks about imports, so some of the top 15 goods and services. So this is who we are trading with. What goods and services do we import? So these are the things that we try and get from other countries, and why we do that. So you can read through that. It should help you with these questions here that you'll be completing in your digital notebook. So, question 1. Define the terms import and export. So that's pretty straightforward, a nice easy definition question. What's the difference between those two terms? Question 2. Identify two positive and two negative economic effects of imports in Australia. So how do imports help out Australia? Two positive things. And how do imports actually hurt Australia or people within Australia? And there's actually a really good table in chapter 22.6 to help answer that question. So I recommend you go find that. Question 3. This one's more of an opinion piece. I just want you guys to give me your opinion and then tell me why you feel that way. So no wrong answers as long as you explain your answer. Question 3. Do you believe imports and exports are overall a positive or a negative effect of globalization? Justify your response. So again, you have some people who think that globalization, trading with other countries, buying international products are a good thing. You have some people who think that it is a bad thing. So which camp do you fall into? So look at that table that I mentioned on positive and negative effects. Think about what you've studied in the previous slides and come to a conclusion. You know what? I think that globalization, imports, exports, I think it's a good thing, or I think it's a bad thing. And then tell me why in 1 or 2 sentences. Cool. So that's what you're looking at this lesson, guys. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know. Otherwise, best of luck and cheers.